Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about one of the things that at times amuses me and at other times it reminds me that maybe people have a lot more they need to understand about training programming, prioritization of their supplemental work and everything else. And that's, I'll run periods of time or phases to where I use, say, a supplemental exercise. Such as before a previous deload, I did 3 weeks of doing tons and tons of snatch grip high pulls, right? And during that time, I wasn't doing as much GPP. I wasn't doing any plyometric work and things like that. So it's something that I added in to help push my whole shoulder girdle into overreaching before a deload. And I did a ton of it, and then after the deload, none of it was there. And of course, people came in and said, hey, why did you take those out? And when we're dealing with conjugate training, that is absolutely the wrong way to look at things. Why? Because we always rotate exercises. We run speed work in 3-week waves, but a lot of our supplemental work, sometimes we can change it on a weekly basis, a bi-weekly basis. Sometimes we run different supplemental work on a max day versus a speed day. We oftentimes rotate movements out after 2 or 3 weeks no matter what. Very frequently we'll do so. And it's not that we took them out. It's that we are looking at on a weekly basis of how much training volume can we handle? How much can we recover from? What are our training priorities? Because our main stuff is always fixed. We're always rotating through 2 max effort lifts every week. And we always change those. We didn't take the other lift out. In other words, if we go from a max squat to a max deadlift variation on 2 different weeks, we didn't take the max squat out. We simply chose to max on a deadlift. If we go from a max with bands on the bench press to a dead stop pin bench or a board press, we didn't take the band monitor at max out. We just used a different max lift that week. And the same thing can be applied to a lot of the supplemental work. We have to look at priority. Now, in my case, I was using that to push very, very high volumes of training because the last couple of workouts on both the upper and lower days, for example, I was doing 7 triples with fairly heavy weight. Heavy for me. As extra supplemental volume because I wanted to overreach a little bit going into that deload. But we look at that from a perspective of what is it that we need. And we focus upon our largest weak links. So if you're coming in and you decide to, in a coming block or a coming week or a coming phase or a single day, say, hey, I'm going to do a lot of extra upper back work. I'm going to do a bunch of extra tricep work or hamstring work. We don't look at it from the perspective of we took out the pec work or the shoulder work we were doing. We don't look at it from that perspective. We look at it as putting the training volume and the training stimulus where it needs to be for our supplemental work. All of our accessory movements, special exercises, all these things that we do. Because we only have so much recovery resources. We only have so much training time. No matter what lifestyle you live, you're going to have limits. Now, me personally, I can get away with a ton of training time. 2 home businesses that I run from home, largely making my own schedule. I don't have any responsibilities that I don't choose to take upon myself. So therefore, it gives me a lot of training time. However, I don't have unlimited recovery resources. Can only sleep so much in a day. In fact, I've reached points and periods of time and phases where I can't sleep tons. Like I find I can only sleep 8 hours. Well, you're not going to be able to have unlimited recovery resources if you can't make yourself sleep for 10. Or if you're not in a calorie surplus. Like for me, at a period of time right now, I'm in a very, very, very small calorie deficit. It's a very mild one. It's a very low, slow loss of body weight. So that I can continue to make gains, for example. We have limited recovery resources in that environment. When you're not in a calorie surplus and you're only sleeping 7 or 8 hours a day, let's say 8 hours a day, you're not going to have the same recovery ability that you would on 10 hours of sleep and when bulking. What about when you're adding extra conditioning work and even restoration work? Okay, that's going to handle a lot of your extra training volume in a way you can recover from. So there may be less work in your main workouts. So we look at those main workouts and say, where do my priorities need to lay? So in my case, it's going to be a lot of triceps. Not saying there's not some pec and quad work in there. A lot of triceps, a lot of upper back, a lot of hamstring, a lot of hip. Okay. Where most of my supplemental volume is. Most of it, obviously, things like deficit deadlifts are in there. Maybe some closed grip board presses and other stuff are in there. They're still hitting those other big muscles for supplemental work, but most of it's geared towards that. We didn't pull other stuff out, and you don't look at it that way. We look at it as, am I putting the work where it needs to go this week? You don't worry about what your previous week or block was. You look at, where are my weak links right now? That's what needs the most work. It doesn't matter that something else needed the most work a month ago, or we prioritize something else. It's largely irrelevant. You didn't remove the work. We put the work where it needs to go so that we can get stronger, so we can get more jacked. Because really getting stronger and getting more jacked are the same thing. Because if you prioritize your weakest links, you're going to get thicker and stronger and more jacked in general. You're going to get there faster. Allocate resources appropriately. It is the wrong mindset to say, oh, I pulled this exercise out. There needs to be no exercise that you look at from that perspective. There is no exact variation of any movement that you are always going to keep in and say, I'm going to do this exercise every week no matter what. I'm not pulling it out. Well, that's the sort of attitude that you're going to have when you want overuse injuries in the long term or stagnation. Not saying we can't do a close variation of something. Like, yes, I will always do good mornings of some type, always do box squats of some type. Probably the only thing I have in my routine that's always 100% constant these days is the reverse hyper. But that's a special, unique case, isn't it? It serves multiple roles that are irreplaceable. There is nothing in existence that can replace exactly what I need that movement to do. There is no variation to replace it. Unless I got a different reverse hyper to run with it. I mean, I could go over and do single leg versions or something maybe. But outside of that, in my case, everything is replaceable. Even my favorite speed works and stuff, we might end up using a different bar. I use a different range of motion. Okay? Nothing is irreplaceable. Therefore, you can't think in those terms of, oh, I removed this lift. No. You simply allocated those resources towards a different priority. And we always need to be doing that. We always need to be rotating stuff to some extent to avoid overuse, to avoid stagnation, to keep progressing. And it's a different mindset, because if we do get hung in the traditional progressive overload model, which, by the way, novice lifters need to use, it would behoove them to master that your first year in the gym. But as we get more and more advanced, that model has some major problems. And when you get hung up in that model, it's, oh, I always have to be progressing on a specific exercise. No, you need to be progressing. You need to be progressing in your weak links. Okay, that's what you need to be progressing on. And if we're correctly identifying our weak links and we're prioritizing our recovery resources appropriately, we don't look at it as I remove something. We look at it as resource allocation in the present. Because that's what it is, and that's the mindset that we do need to take. It's a mindset we do need to take, and we can never have an exact movement pattern to where we say, oh, this has to be there. No, I can't take this out. There's no taking out. It is purely allocation of the current resources at any given time. because you didn't take anything out. You took it out the moment you finished the last rep. You're not doing the movement the moment you finish. It's about resource allocation. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.